3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the dark lord on his throne. Thus begins one of the most famous pieces of world building in modern fiction. Of course, if you're familiar with the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, you probably realize that his efforts to build a believable world, to build believable characters, to build just this really authentic place that we can inhabit while we enjoy his stories, are not really limited to poetry, right? Like, the guy built freaking functional languages, after all. One of the reasons why Tolkien's work is so divisive, at least among sort of modern younger readers today, is because he does so much world building, right? And he builds so much upon his characters. He gives you so much detail. He spent so much time describing the trees or describing the mushrooms or whatever the case may be, describing the food. And for me, like, I really, really like those kind of details. But I started reading, like many of you, I'm sure, before like the name of the game and sort of our pop culture was, 10-second videos that we communicate with via Snapchat, or 140 characters, or listicles on BuzzFeed and things like that. So while I appreciate it, I also understand that in my own writing, when I'm going about building my world in search of that sort of authenticity, that sort of immersive feeling to my fiction, even things like providing a map or going too deeply into the lore of the world, or going too deeply even into the lore of my characters, which I think are the most important part, is kind of a no-no, and it will sort of stunt the work and keep people, especially younger people, from wanting really to read it. In my story, sort of temporarily named 6 Marks, I'm lucky because I don't have to do a ton of world building. My story is based in Shinmei, which is a town in the city that I live in about 200 years ago. And so the map that I've used to sort of construct things that happen, the settings and stuff like that, is a real map. But of course, I've added to it and embellished it a little bit. But I know where the shrines are, I know where the river is, I know where the mountains are and everything like that. So when I'm talking about it, I have a very clear picture in my head of, for example, how my main character Honoka gets from Shinmei here in modern-day Sabai City to Fukui City, which is the capital of this prefecture here in Japan, right? So I can see that, and it's really, really important to me. But that's something I want to talk about with you today, is that anything I put down on the page, it has to serve the story, and the pace has to keep going, and it has to keep you interested. So when I talk about world building, right, I of course mean quite literally world building. I mean like what the world around your story looks like. That means the languages, the races, the geography, many, many, many different things. But also I kind of want to extend it into the developing of your characters, because there again, I think there can be too much. One of my great struggles is that I spend so much time developing the environment in my stories, and then when I do get into character descriptions, those are sort of long-winded too. In my story that I mentioned, 6 Marks, my main character is this woman named Honoka, and she's the leader of the sect of Onmyoji. Onmyoji is this group of Shinto priests that actually existed, and I think still exist to a certain extent, that were used only when there was sort of like an occult thing happening in Japan. The emperor would call them in, and he'd be like, yo, this girl in X town is being terrorized by a demon or whatever, so they'd send the Onmyoji out to sort of deal with them. That's an oversimplification, but there are so many things that I feel I need or want to know about Honoka, her past, things she does, the way she talks, everything like that, that are essential to me writing her as an interesting, believable character, right? But do you need to know which hand she eats with? Do you need to know that she doesn't have, in the more traditional sense, she doesn't really have a family because of the sect she belongs to? They sort of recruit from children, right? Do you need to know that the sect that she's a part of requires this sort of ritualistic, periodic, complete refusal of identity, this sort of like periodic sort of synthesized amnesia, because they don't want you to have too strong a sense of self? Do you want to know? Do you need to know? Does it serve the story to know that she really, her greatest pleasure in life is just being able to sit over tea and have genuine conversation with people, whether they agree with her about whatever the conversation topic is or not? Do you need to know that? And so really this is my dilemma, right? As her writer, knowing all these things about her makes her a true joy to write. It's like writing about a real, fully fleshed out person, right? Like, because I know these things about her, they inform her, right? Like, I can understand, there's a hair in my eyeball. I can understand why she reacts to like this sort of dick of a cop, this sort of dick of a like a local cop who works in Shinmei, where the setting is set, where the story is set in the way that she does, right? I can understand why her commitment to her order comes sort of before anything else, like whether it's because of the fact that she's been with them for so long, because of the fact that there's sort of this ritualistic practice of refusing the self. I can understand all of that, and for me, like I'm saying, the writing becomes easier and it becomes a lot more interesting for me. But for you, the reader, I worry about the pacing. I worry about balancing believability with, okay, enough, I get it already. On that note, I leave it to you guys, the readers, the writers and the readers out there who have consumed many, many works of fiction, who are making their own works of fiction. And I wonder how you find your balance. How do you decide that the details of your character's upbringing aren't important to the story? How do you decide that, I don't know, the fact that she loves tea and conversation isn't important? I'd really like to hear from you guys down in the comments below. It's something I'm really trying to work through as I'm sort of in the hacking and buffing and sort of making pretty process of getting through this draft, which is not the draft, that's getting through like these final stages of editing that's been taking a lot longer than I hoped it would. But anyway, on that note, let me know down in the comments below what your feelings are on this. Where is the line for you when a writer has sort of crossed over from telling you about the world that he or she has created for the story into something that's basically like a tome or like an encyclopedia where you feel like you're just like, oh my god, too many details? I'm really, really interested to hear about that from you guys. So let me know in the comments below, and immediately following that, be sure to go write something awesome.
They were talking about how they color things kind of from how the character would get dressed. So, I mean, you don't dress your skin per se, but I usually start with the skin and then work up from there. In this case, I might color the